to care for, develop, and enhance the quality of life, with love and understanding from a dedicated staff. Persons with intellectual disability of all races and creeds are entrusted to us by providing trust in the divine providence and in cooperation with the parents, the community, and the state. We provide the necessary spiritual, nursing, therapy, and stimulation services in a manner that is efficient and economic as possible. That is the mission statement of Little Eden, an NPO founded in 1967 by Domitilla Himes, who believed that intellectually disabled persons deserve to be loved and to be cared for, and have a place in society. Little Eden has custom-made facilities in Edenvale and Popsfontein, and is home to over 300 residents from all ages and walks of life. Little Eden is driven by its purpose and the values instilled by its founder, and is determined to continue to make positive contributions to society as it has done so for the past 54 years. We will analyze, synthesize, and provide recommendations on aspects such as management accounting, macroeconomics, ethics and sustainability, and information and knowledge management, all in which one way or another impact Little Eden.
Little Eden's variable costs include food, water, clothes, medication, and doctor visits. Fixed costs such as monthly rent of the property and administration staff salaries are also incurred. Although most of the costs that they incur are necessary, when their income does not cover all the costs, they then prioritize expenses such as food, carer salaries, and medication. Little Eden uses a current ratio and a net surplus ratio. They don't keep stock, capitalize their assets, or have loans, therefore related ratios are not calculated. The non-financial ratio that Little Eden uses is the staff turnover ratio. They work to fulfill the human resource objectives through staff acknowledgement, staff motivation, and creating an atmosphere where the staff has a sense of belonging. All employees' performance is measured according to their ability to complete the tasks stated in their job descriptions, such as medical assistance, physical care, clothing, bathing, feeding, and ability to cook, clean, and keep the grounds neat. The site manager is on the floor every day to do the evaluations and ensure that all tasks are completed effectively. Incidents are then used as learning experiences in staff meetings to improve performance. Income trends from previous years are used to forecast income for the current year. Little Eden prepares the budget based on the previous year's actual figures plus inflation. Little Eden's mission emphasizes providing care to the residents in an efficient and economic manner as possible. The constant review of their budget against actuals to forecast expenses for the rest of the year proves that their budget aims to eliminate waste while ensuring that long-term quality care of the residents is achieved. Little Eden produces cash flow statements, statements of comprehensive income, and statements of financial position. This information allows them to determine if they are going to be financially stable for the future. On a monthly basis, the 4 managers provide a report to the CEO, including information regarding resident admissions, discharges, and deaths, to keep track of the number of residents. In terms of the budget, the team compares budgeted and actual figures to ensure that they are not exceeding the budget figures and that spending stays within limits. Once Little Eden receives the medication, it is stored in a site manager's office behind 2 locked doors. There are also many cameras around the premises, which are used to monitor activities and incidents. The senior staff are able to determine the reason for incidents and correct mistakes. In 2021, donations from the public decreased by 9.46% compared to the previous year. To encourage repeat donations, Little Eden should share the impact that the donations make on them through photos of the residents and explanations of the positive impact made. They should also encourage donors to engage with the residents to have a first-hand experience. To attract new donors, we recommend that Little Eden increases their advertising in new regions in order to reach new potential donors. The volunteer turnover rate at Little Eden contributes significantly to the overall staff turnover rate. To attract and empower self-motivated volunteers, they can have a self-sign-up process where individuals can self-register. This would make the majority of the volunteers more deliberate about volunteering and give Little Eden information they need to best support the volunteers from the beginning.
The overall growth rate of the South African economy is currently waning and falling short of Treasury's expectations. Using gross domestic product as a benchmark indicates that paired against the inflation rate, South Africans are statistically poorer year on year than they have been in preceding years. Employment in the country is at an all-time low, specifically youth unemployment being at an all-time high. The economy has been unable to absorb the growing number of young people into the working population and has thus resulted in a number of unemployed young people ballooning. The main issue in this regard is that the population of the country is growing faster than the size of the economy and its ability to absorb said people. Attempts to structurally reform the economy and reinvigorate growth by leveraging fiscal tools have been hampered by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Funds which had previously been allocated towards boosting initiatives were redirected towards primary pandemic responses. This will undoubtedly impact the future growth prospects of the economy. The government has been facing major pressures on the fiscus in relation to promoting growth while dealing with the increasing fiscal deficit. The expanding nature of government spending on borrowed money has resulted in the rate of growth due to that spending being minimized. The current slide shows a breakdown of Little Eden's expenditure for the financial year ending on the 31st of March 2021. From this graphic, it is apparent that a large proportion of the organization's expenditures relate directly to the care of their residents. The three largest costs are for care of the residents, personnel, i.e. human resources costs, and then administrative costs. Little Eden currently outsources personnel in an effort to reduce their operating costs, but due to the nature of the work that they do, they require specialized and highly trained staff. The COVID-19 pandemic has further increased this cost as skilled healthcare workers are in high demand. The organization receives almost 50% of their revenue from government via the disability grant of the individuals in their care. The balance is made up from their corporate and individual donations, as well as their own income generating activities, in particular their charity shop, which had to be stopped as the COVID-19 pandemic arrived. Little Eden was very pragmatic on the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. They had to manage their core responsibilities of taking care of their residents, but weigh that against their need to raise funding for their core operations. Fundraisers, which were a key revenue generating activity, were stopped and non-essential activities were halted in order to ensure that there was a positive cash flow for the organization. In ensuring uncertainty of the pandemic, corporate funding did decrease by almost 10% as businesses attempted to consolidate their balance sheets. But the pandemic did, however, mean that government allocated additional funds to the Department of Social Development and Health, which led to an increase in revenue for the organization. Large fiscal deficits within municipalities and provincial levels continue to remain a substantial risk for the organization. Little Eden presents a multitude of opportunities for enhancing their current revenues. They currently have a farm on their facilities, which has been made into a pecan nut orchard. In 2020, the organization was able to harvest 8.5 tons of nuts and was further able to plant additional trees which would be marketable in the next 7 years. The farm and further agricultural activities aid in not just generating revenue, but in reducing cost. There is food which is grown at the facility, which is then consumed by the residents. Little Eden also has the opportunity to leverage their small-scale farming operations to involve agricultural organizations like AgriSA or the Citrus Growers Association of South Africa, and even academic organizations could be approached to make their operations part of a community-based skills upliftment program. Increased usage of social media is also an avenue which could generate revenue for Little Eden. Increasingly, the world is shifting towards a digital media, and the proliferation of digital donations and crowdfunding initiatives is something that this organization has not successfully capitalized on. Aside from direct donations, a social media presence will also market Little Eden as a brand, not just locally but internationally, and it will open up additional funding avenues for further enhancements of the organization's brand and the good work that they do.
In 1967, Philippa Foot provided a sound experiment to moral frameworks through the trolley problem at Oxford University, an experiment used to provide useful analysis to moral reasoning. Ethical frameworks therefore inform the mission and purpose of an organization. For Little Eden, their values of care and love, respect, and sanctity of life are reflective of Ubuntu and the care philosophy, and this is ingrained in their processes. Ethical dilemmas are, however, a part of our lives, and Little Eden is not exempt to this. Ethical dilemmas for Little Eden relate to receiving donations from donors whose ethos is not aligned to theirs, or where there may be an expectation in return for funds donated. Little Eden is steadfast on refusing to accept any donations which may result in the mentioned. As a result, is in the process of establishing a social and ethics committee that will put a strong scrutiny on dilemmas that may exist. With the increased pressures on organizations to adopt sustainability, we unpacked the ESGs and how they relate to Little Eden. In 2019, Hennies et al. Recognized the importance of ESGs with relation to the value it provides to the stakeholders and the long-term sustainability of an organization. The most critical and pressing for Little Eden is financial sustainability, especially in the light of the pandemic. As a result, government and donors are stakeholders that Little Eden ensures to maintain good relations with to ensure business continuity. Little Eden receives state funding that represents no more than 47% of their income. However, to be able to adequately take care of its residents, it still requires donor funds from corporates, foundations, and individuals. Little Eden also runs a charity shop, which it sells clothes and furniture to ensure it is able to survive in these pressing times. The Orchards initiative is the integration of the environment into the therapy that Little Eden uses. It recognizes the positive effects of animal and music therapy. The residents are also involved in the Orchards initiative, and this gives them a great sense of belonging and self-worth. Elvira Rota Village has dedicated 30 hectares of land to agriculture, and this is for pecan nuts, maize, and vegetables. After recognizing higher financial return from pecan nuts harvests compared to maize or soybeans, Little Eden expanded the orchard from 220 trees to 787 trees as part of their sustainability plan.
The insights that the organization can obtain through the existing data is being aware of the history and interactions of their donors, both corporate and individual. The organization can use the existing data to better understand the behavior of their donors. This will thereafter assist them in knowing how to approach the donors. In order to achieve their strategic intent, Little Eden will require financial stability. Their long-term goal is to become completely financially stable through self-sustaining practices without having to rely on donors as their primary income source. Little Eden should look at the more current ways of raising awareness and funds, such as crowdfunding platforms and social media campaigns. Information and knowledge management tools to execute on. The first tool would be socialization. The organization already involves its staff in obtaining tacit knowledge regarding information about potential donors. They have turned their staff into ambassadors for their organization. To better improve on this tool, the organization needs to get more of its members in the organization collaborating and allowing access to this information. However, the donor information data is available to all members of staff. The data capturing system needs refinement, as the organization needs to classify all donors in order to know the original source of the donations that are entering the organization. This in the long run could hamper the ethos of the organization, as the organization does not accept donors who stray away from ethics. Therefore, anonymous donors are hard to identify. Their histories are unknown, their legitimacy in business is also unknown, and their monies need to be revealed as to where they emanate from. By implementing a volunteer program where the volunteers are paired with individuals or groups with the sole purpose of being a friend, someone to talk to, and a mentor, the volunteers will get to know the individuals and become known as a buddy. A program of this sort will not only relieve the pressure of the full-time staff, but will assist in enabling them to perform their primary roles and responsibilities, whilst adding value to the experience of the residents within the home. The second tool is externalization. The organization needs to go outside of its own vacuum to obtain information from the outside, such as new government regulations, new potential donors, new residents they would like to help, and also new potential staff. The organization hosts events and invites the public, creating its own opportunities for securing donors, and in other instances, the organization performs community service at schools and recruits students who are still learning for a later stage in their life where they will be beneficial to the organization in one way or another. The problem with this tool, according to the organization, has been the limitations imposed by law, such as the Poppy Act, which has brought about barriers to the organization's direct marketing strategies. A suggestion to Little Eden. Regarding externalization, we would recommend that they make their presence more felt, such as their digital footprint by having accounts on almost all platforms on social media and constantly update their accounts to make them remain active and current, as this will gain the organization much needed traction along with awareness and a strong following.